The Supreme Court search continues as the president interviews more candidates for the bench. Everybody's talking about what this means for Roe versus Wade, but might same-sex marriage also be in jeopardy, assuming another conservative joins the court? Also, we'll get the latest from Washington from ABC political news director, Rick Klein. North Korea, Russia, the embattled EPA head Scott Pruitt, all that and more. Then there's a lot of bad news out there, and America is very divided. But we're going to look at what's good about our country as we head into the 4th of July and celebrate our independence. Good evening and welcome to RFL. I'm Andrew Whitman, in tonight for Richard French. And as we get ready to celebrate Independence Day, President Trump is getting ready to make one of the most important decisions of his presidency, a second Supreme Court justice nominee, this time to replace Anthony Kennedy, who had been the swing vote on the court for years.
President Trump is sprinting towards making a Supreme Court pick.
They are outstanding people. They are really incredible people in so many different ways.
On Monday, the president interviewed 4 potential nominees: Judge Brett Kavanaugh, Judge Amy Coney Barrett, Judge Amol Thapar, and Judge Raymond Kethledge. He sat with those contenders, all appellate court judges ranging in age from late 40s to early 50s, for 45 minutes each. He's expected to meet face-to-face with 2 or 3 more. ABC News has learned those include federal judge Thomas Hardiman and appellate court judge Joan Larson.
I can tell you that has got a great list, and we're excited about who he's going to pick.
During the campaign, candidate Trump vowed to select justices who would overturn Roe v. Wade.
I am putting pro-life justices on the court.
But now the president told Fox News he won't ask about that landmark abortion case.
Well, that's a big one, and probably not. They're all saying, don't do that, you don't do that, you shouldn't do that, but I'm putting conservative people on.
When asked about Roe v. Wade, the White House only had this to say.
The president is pro-life. He's not going to talk to judges about specific cases. He's looking for individuals that have the right intellect, the right temperament, and that will uphold the Constitution.
All right, so let's digest this Supreme Court decision. And to do that, we introduce our panel. Tonight, independent political consultant Michael Tobman is here. And on the other side of the table is Joseph Pinion. Joe's a Republican strategist and a Republican candidate for the New York State Assembly. Gentlemen, welcome. I'm assuming, like most people, that this is a fait accompli, that whoever the president nominates is going to get through the Senate, is going to wind up on the Supreme Court. And of course, abortion and Roe v. Wade is the single biggest issue that everybody brings up when talking about the Supreme Court. Here's what I want to know. Is there a backlash that this White House may not be anticipating from tilting the court in a position where Roe versus Wade could be on the chopping block? We talk about abortion a lot, but it's never been this directly threatened, Michael.
Even saying the issue is one of abortion casts it in a certain light. It's an issue of reproductive rights and women's health. And it is the law of the land, just as marriage equality is the law of the land, according to the U.S. Supreme Court, and that's the precedent. The court, though conservative, and I agree with you that the president's nominee will be confirmed by the Senate with all the Republican votes, some Democratic votes, Senator Collins saying, you know, reproductive rights and Roe v. Wade is very important to me, but it's not going to come up. And they're going to say, I don't have a position on this because this is not what was in front of us right now. What is in front of us is my accomplishments, my pedigree, and my temperament. 70% of Americans, I believe the poll is, support reproductive rights. And on issues of marriage equality and increasingly on issues of gender equity, there's a generational divide where even on the far right, generally speaking, people under a certain age, I don't know, we call it 45, call it 40, just are for these things. They need not come up again. So to rally both the bases on the right and the left, direct mail solicitations, social media, fundraising, energizing the base heading into the midterms. Yes, these are issues that are going to be discussed. I believe, and I hope I'm right, be very disappointed if I'm not, that these issues simply will not be relitigated.
But I also suspect, Joe, that the pro-choice backlash against the White House could hurt the Republican Party for years. I know it's a galvanizing issue for Republicans, but it's going to become a galvanizing issue for Democrats in a way it hasn't been.
Well, look, I think that if you're talking about the long-term trends, about where we're headed as a party as a result of some of the policies, and not even necessarily the policies, but the manner in which the policies are being implemented, I think without a question, there's going to be some long-term damage done here. I mean, there's always that saying, right, that you have upticks on the way down. I don't care whether you're talking about the fact that if it's a stock or whether you're talking about a party. And the reality is that right now, at the GOP right now, we are in an uptick. We have the Oval Office, we have the House, and we have the Senate. And so the question becomes, what is going to get accomplished? I think the hardcore base is obviously going to be excited by the notion that, again, we're going to put two people on the court. And to that end, we're going to have, when you start talking about the fact that you have 10 Democrats who are going to be having in states that Donald Trump won, trying to get themselves reelected this year, I think that it goes to your point, it goes without question that whoever that judge is going to get confirmed.
I think you're absolutely right. And I will just point out that Republicans are in the majority in the House and the Senate and the White House, but they did not get a majority of the votes for either one of those bodies, for any of those bodies. More Democratic senators got votes than Republican senators, more Democratic House members got votes than, if you add them all up. And of course, President Trump won the Electoral College without winning the popular vote. I want to move on to another issue here, because you mentioned same-sex marriage and other LGBT protections. Kennedy was the swing vote on same-sex marriage. Religious freedom and religious freedom objections, like the Colorado cake case and other cases, are coming in. Is there a fear, should the left be concerned of an erosion of gay rights coming from this court? And is that sort of taking us back to a place where it feels settled to a certain degree?
I think the erosion of civil liberties and protections around LGBT, gay and transgender issues is more worrisome than around reproductive rights. We see the Supreme Court queued up this affirmative action case involving admissions and Asian American students at Harvard. This is all, I would say that's more worrisome. Thankfully, states have significant leeway to afford their own protections, but that's just going to get us right back to state A says this, state B says that. There's a conflict that's going to wind back at the Supreme Court.
And I ask this because America is always described as being a center-right country. And the Supreme Court is about to move from arguably center-right to solidly right, to overly generalize. I would also argue that I don't think this country is a center-right country. I really don't. I think it's a moderate country, and I think on social issues it maybe even leans left a little bit. And Joe, I think there's a sense among a lot of people that the Supreme Court is going to wind up being out of step with where a lot of the country is.
I think the truth of the matter is that we have no idea where the court's going to end up. I mean, even if you go back to the appointment of Justice Kennedy himself, I think that there was this interpretation of where they thought that he was going to end up.
Well, but do you really think that the president, after having consulted with, the Federalist Society, is going to pick a justice who winds up being a rogue moderate?
To be quite honest, there's no way to know. I mean, particularly with some of the judges, they don't have the breadth or they don't have the resume that would allow you to say with any definity that they're going to be X way on one vote or X way on another vote. So I think the broader issue, I think, here is to say that, look, particularly when you start talking about rights for the LGBTQ community, I think when you're talking about morally, I think that would be a horrible place for us as a nation to end up. I think politically, it is a losing issue for the GOP. And I think that if you look long term, I mean, right now we have actually two major events coming up between now and Election Day with young Republican organizations that I've worked with, again, trying to affirm the rights of LGBTQ members of the community. And so when you look at it from a generational standpoint, this, I think I've always said that to look at the issue of race or to look at the issues of civil rights, I look at it generationally. And to me, each generation, irrespective of political sensibilities, you start to see the shift in the tides. And so I think right now we have an opportunity right now as a party to say that, look, whatever's going to happen on the court is going to happen, but I think that there are people who are smart enough to realize that this is a losing issue all around.
I'm not sure I'm following you on the what's going to happen is going to happen. I mean, we have the opportunity to shape what's going to happen. The president has the opportunity to shape what's going to happen. This isn't happening in a vacuum. No, I mean, he could pick Merrick Garland if he wanted to moderate on the court and keep the moderates.
I do agree with my colleague. Forgive me for speaking over you. There's the political, civic, legal issues, but culturally, I do agree that this country is headed in a certain direction that is going to be increasingly separate from our political life, our cultural life and our intimate lives and our relationships are just going to look very, very different than our politics. But look, I mean, you could appoint a very conservative justice and he or she will be confirmed, and then they could just never address the issue.
Except it's not just our politics, especially where the court's concerned, it becomes the law of the land. And so you could theoretically have a society that's out of step with the laws that it's being governed by.
I think we fundamentally look at this issue the wrong way. I think if you look at the issue of abortion or look at the issue of women's reproductive rights, I think that we look, again, to your point before, we frame it as a abortion or not abortion issue. To me, when I talk to young conservatives and when I talk to Americans in general, we should be talking about how do we have a society where there are less abortions? Because I don't care what woman you're talking to, every woman to a person will tell you it is literally the worst day of their entire life, most of them. And so I think when you look at it from that standpoint of saying, what policies should we be putting forward? Should we be having access to birth control? When you start talking about people talking about even things that are not too far from now, talking about artificial wombs and things of that nature, and what interplay does that have there? These are the conversations. If you're talking about what court cases I'm concerned about, those are the court cases that are going to be coming forward that we should be talking
where
about.
Science starts to outstrip and outpace the law.
Right.
When is a fetus viable outside the womb? Artificial. So that's where these issues will come up, and I hope that the court is qualified to weigh in on that.
Quickly on this, because we're beginning to run out of time, how would you guys feel about term limits for Supreme Court justices? Maybe 20 years?
I'm against term limits for the federal judiciary.
Just
As an attorney, I think you need to have this inoculation from politics, even if it's
But you would still be inoculated. You would just be out in 20 years. I mean, it's not.
I think,
I don't
again,
feel it.
I think that you start having court planning at that point. And yes, on some basic level that happens now, but there were very few people that before the news broke that thought Kennedy was going to be retiring this past week. And so I think, again, if you get into that situation, we end up having difficulties.
Okay. I've also heard some people talking about an age cap on Supreme Court service. Again, trying to make the court closer in step with where the country is.
I think the reality is the law is the law. I think that this is what happens. We have individuals who try to start acting as if somehow that, you can start nudging the court to be.
I understand that, but I know the law is the law, but we can always change the law. I'm just trying to figure out a way, if there's a way to make this more responsive and work better.
Thoughtful, well-intentioned, well-pedigreed, intelligent judges well into their 90s are going to be safely in a position to do their job.
All right, we will take a break. When we come back, we head to Washington for updates on North Korea, Russia, and the latest scandal in the Trump administration. ABC News political director Rick Klein is here next.